Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of the Before School podcast. I just want to tell you guys that I only know 25 letters of the alphabet. I don't know why. Okay, that was a joke. I thought that I might start these podcasts out with a little joke just to enhance the mood a bit. Anyways, today we have an amazing guest, TJ Power. He's a neuroscientist and we just collaborated together on probably my favorite after-school video ever. So you might have watched this before this podcast, but if you don't, at some point, please check out that collaboration. It's incredible. And today we're gonna dive into brain chemicals. Probably the most important ones are dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin, and endorphins. So TJ has this amazing protocol where he addresses those chemicals, how we can regulate them, and really regulate our lives. So I'm really grateful to talk to him today. And I also wanted to let you guys know that we have these amazing after-school calendars for 2026. Yes, 2026 is upon us. So these are really well printed. I'm really proud of this one. The print quality is amazing. They make great gifts, and I hope you enjoy it. So without further ado, let's talk to TJ Power. TJ Power, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to chat.
Yeah, so we just finished an awesome collaboration, and I gotta say, I think it's my favorite video that I've ever done. And we just went all in on this one. So by the time this podcast comes out, that will be released. So I'm so proud of that one.
That's a crazy sentence to hear, that it genuinely feels that good out of all the unbelievable videos you've made. I have loved making it. The storytelling in it is good. The science is good. So yeah, I'm pumped, mate.
Yeah, lately I've been really infatuated with storytelling, and we just came together, and I think it's just the perfect blend of science and cool fantasy story. And you want to create a little bit of a barrier between reality and the story you're telling, so you don't want things to be too on the nose. So I feel like everybody's going to get the metaphor we're trying to get at, but it's enough distance for people to approach it in a way where it's kind of like Avatar, where we can all see Pandora and see our world in Pandora, but it's not so much, it's not like we're being preached at,
Yeah, I mean, that's a perfect reference as well, because Avatar had such a huge impact on me in my life, of thinking maybe humans are designed to live in this more natural way, like those blue people, the Na'vi. And that's because of your own kind of interpretation of what you see, and people must see it in very different ways. And I imagine with this video we've created, with the different ways in which we reference dopamine-based addictions within the context of this cube, I think it'll be cool to see what people take from it.
Yeah, it's something odd about human nature where we can see whales being hunted on Earth, real whales, and it's hard to watch. We see animal farms and that's painful, but we usually turn a blind eye to that. But then we watch something like Avatar, which is a science fiction movie. It's not real, but we can all see that this alien, it looks just like a whale, and they kill it. And it really hurts us. It gives us an emotional feeling, and we know it's not real, but it's like we almost need that fantasy story to unlock the real emotions deeper down.
We do. I don't know what aspect of the brain the storytelling is. Maybe it's more in the kind of alpha theta brainwaves, where the mind gets to a deeper sense of feeling about something rather than just being kind of busy stimulation state. I think we're all so busy going about our lives to necessarily care about things we probably do care about, but we're missing as a result of constant stimulation. So yeah, I know there's a new Avatar coming out in December, so we're pretty excited about that. It comes out just before our kid is being born, so my partner and I are going to go and watch.
Oh, congratulations. That's exciting times.
yeah, Avatar and the baby. How good is that?
So I guess before we get too deep into this conversation, I should probably introduce you to the audience.
Yes, let's do that.
So you're a neuroscientist, a best-selling author, and your website is DOSE. DOSE stands for dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin, endorphins. So I'm really excited to just get your neuroscientific take on what these things are and how we can control them to better our lives.
Yeah, I've become unbelievably fascinated by these neurotransmitters over the last 10 or 11 years. My whole world has been in trying to understand these chemicals. And I now run this research lab where we've basically turned dose into a psychological intervention where we've gamified how do you rebalance your brain chemistry. And we've created this protocol that we take people through, and then we're measuring loads of cool things around screen time and well-being and sleep and attention spans and their dopamine activation behind how willing are they to do hard things. And for me, I just have struggled so much with being a massive dopamine addict that I've almost built a whole research lab to solve my own addiction to dopamine, and then have discovered this just like mystical world of rebalancing these brain chemicals and how powerful it can be.
Yeah, I think dopamine probably gets the most press. It's probably maybe the most misunderstood because you hear people use it in everyday language. They say, oh, I'm going to have a bite of this cookie and get a dopamine hit, or I'm going to jump in this ice bath and get a dopamine high greater than cocaine, or you hear all sorts of things. And so I was hoping today that we could maybe just go through those 4 neurotransmitters, or are they hormones or brain chemicals? Like what are these class of 4?
Yeah, I mean, you could call them a variety of names. I think neurotransmitters is the greatest name. It's a communication pathway within the brain that is activating upon different behaviors occurring. If we were to take the dopamine one, for example, the very famous one, dopamine is this chemical that's all about anticipating some kind of future reward that we're striving towards, and then it will provide a level of reward if that particular behavior was advantageous to us or maybe disadvantageous to us, and provide a feeling. But ultimately, on a more human, almost storytelling level, as we were discussing before, I think of these neurotransmitters as our friends that have been living within our system for hundreds of thousands of years and are trying to guide us towards optimal survival as a species. And they may send us great messages if we're doing great things. They might send us quite annoying messages if we're doing things that are not advantageous to our future. And the better relationship, the better friendship you can build with them, the better your life will become.
And from what I understand with dopamine, it's heavily tied to our expectations.
Yes.
So like if you think something not good is going to happen and then something amazing happens, it's like this huge surge of dopamine. Is that correct to think about it that way?
Yeah, there's that fantastic equation that happiness equals reality minus expectation. And that almost our expectations have become so high now that our reality never meets the expectation of what we desire. So therefore we're less happy. And with that specific scenario, if, for example, I went to buy a new book, there's a new Dan Brown book, for example, this fictional book. And if someone had told me that it's the best book of all time, the greatest book they've ever read, I'm going to go in with insane expectation and then think, wow, this was a pretty good book. But if my reality didn't meet the expectation of what I foresaw could be how good this book is, I would actually end up thinking that book wasn't good because the expectation was set too high. Whereas if someone said, check out that book, it's pretty decent, and then I read it and thought, wow, this is a great book, because my reality was greater than the expectation, my dopamine would rise more rather than rising less with the previous scenario.
Yeah, that's a great example. It almost makes me think of like sports, where the less likely the chance of winning is, and then if you do win, the greater the celebration. It's like, if there's only a 1% chance you're going to win and you throw up a Hail Mary or you throw up that final shot with 1 second left and it goes in, the emotional surge is huge compared to if you were expected to win, you won, you were winning the entire game from buzzer to buzzer. It's kind of like, all right, that's just another day at the office. Yeah.
I mean, can you imagine, say, for example, humans have been eating meat for a long time. The difference in hunting a deer and finding one deer in 4 weeks to farming cows and just killing them all the time. Obviously, there's very little dopamine hit, effectively, that word hit, off it just being obvious thing that's going to occur. Whereas the novelty of, oh my God, we got a deer, we can now survive for another month, that would have been monumental surges of dopamine. And that monumental surge of dopamine is what then kept creating drive within us as a species to keep pushing through the unbelievably challenging lifestyle that was required for us to live in this easier world we live in today.
So yeah, we have this 100,000 million year old biology that has designed us in a way where we're always driven forward to get the fish or get the deer. And even we could fail 100 times, but we just keep on driving forward. And it's the primitive hunter that has that drive reward system in them the strongest, that will push farther, get the berries, get the meat. That used to be our survival instincts. That would help us survive. Now in our modern world, it's like that same biological drive has been inverted and has been, big companies are using that to harvest our energy, attention, and control our life.
That is the exact reality we're in. And this is why becoming conscious of the way in which you interact with dopamine is so crucial to your life, your future, your mental state, your relationships. Oh, my apologies. And I'll just pause.
Not a problem. It happens.
I'm on Do Not Disturb, so I don't know how that came through. Let me get my brain back.
Dopamine.
And this is where dopamine is super interesting, because in the same way in which dopamine was creating this drive, even in the immense hunger and famine that we would have faced in those challenging periods, dopamine was motivating us towards a certain decision. Dopamine is still trying to guide us in the modern world. It's still trying to guide us towards survival. And the reason at a deeper level within this circuitry that you feel like shit when you watch porn or eat sugar or scroll social media for hours is because those things are disadvantageous to your survival as a species. Obviously, over-interacting with porn, over-interacting with sugar, removing yourself from social environments and scrolling social media all day, these things are not advantageous to us surviving. And dopamine is still trying to send us a message. It might be in the opposite direction of do less of something rather than do more of something, but it's still a very wise chemical that's here to guide us.
That's a great point. When you kind of put an evolutionary lens over all of our behaviors, everything starts to make a lot more sense. Like if the goal is just to get your genes as far into the future as possible, all these other things that we do, we wear high heel shoes and put on makeup and deodorant, and we do all these things that are kind of bizarre and seem unnatural. Yeah. But when you look at it strictly just from you're trying to pass your genes on to the future, everything, all our strange behaviors can be seen as like mating rituals or tests to see if you're going to be a good parent. That seeing things in that evolutionary lens has helped me make sense of a lot of behaviors.
Me too. And I think we need a deeper understanding of that ancient circuitry as we try and navigate this current landscape, because we're living in a very unusual time as a species. For hundreds of thousands of years for Homo sapiens, for our pre-hominin ancestors, as you mentioned, millions of years we've ran around outside. And we're in this very unique century where we're almost birthing a new life form of AI and robots and things like that. And we're also just living in the most artificial time ever with our food, with the way in which we spend all our time inside, sitting down, not moving. And I just think in order for humanity to survive this transition we're going through, we have to look back at the past to know how the brain was built, and then we can apply that knowledge in order to navigate the world we're in today. But if you just sort of blindly go into the world we're in today, you just wake up, you scroll your phone all day, you sit down all day, you watch videos all day, and you just don't really act as a true human. And if we act as a true human, and then we add some of this cool modern stuff, phones are pretty useful, computers are useful, cameras are great. If we add the modern stuff in to a nice ancient model, then we can have an unbelievable time in this world we're in.
I love your Instagram. You have one of the best Instagrams out there. It's so productive. Very rare to see on Instagram a page that actually makes your life better. But you talk a lot about natural dopamine versus artificial dopamine. And I'd love it if you could maybe clarify what's the difference between natural and artificial?
Natural, very simply, is dopamine that you've earned through effort, and artificial is dopamine that's been given to you for free, almost. Not financially for free, but given to you too easily. And natural dopamine was always earned. If you think of starting a fire in the wild, it would have been hours of scratching the rocks together or building shelters to survive or hunting the food. Dopamine was earned, and we accessed it a few times a day, these real elevations in dopamine when we found the food, the fire lit, the shelter got finished building. The artificial dopamine provides dopamine rapidly within our brain without having to go through that earning curve almost. And when you say, for example, to take a scenario that's very clear, sit down on the sofa in the evening and read a book for 20 or 30 minutes, you don't feel good the first sentence you read of the book. But after 30 minutes, you feel great. You feel satisfied and rewarded, and you've naturally generated dopamine through effort. When you sit on the sofa and nail TikTok for 30 minutes, you do feel good straight away. But after 30 minutes, you feel unsatisfied and not good. And that's the difference between this natural and artificial nature of how we access this neurotransmitter.
Yeah. Oh, there's a few different directions I want to respond, but the one that comes to mind is Dr. Anna Lemke. She talks about this pleasure-pain balance in the brain, and so it's like a lever. If you push into pleasure, you're going to get an equal and opposite reaction of pain afterwards. If you push into pain, you'll get a prolonged duration of pleasure afterwards. So, like, let's say you snort cocaine, huge dopamine spike, but then for many hours afterwards, you'll have this kind of quote unquote crash. Whereas if you did the opposite, you did a ice bath that was this huge spike of pain, you would have this prolonged 2.5 hour period of heightened dopamine. That's what she talks about in her book, Dopamine Nation.
Yeah, and that model is very effective and would make sense evolutionarily why it would develop in our brain for a life that was unbelievably painful, because there wasn't that much pleasure for our ancestors. There was pleasure in love. They would have sex. That would have been a pleasurable experience. The moments they found food, that would have been pleasurable. Deep connection to nature and God would have been pleasurable, but nowhere near on the scale of just all-day pleasure like we can access now. But what they did experience is unbelievable amounts of pain, physical pain, psychological pain, in order to survive out there in the wild, in the proper animal kingdom. We can't really comprehend how hard that actually would have been now that we live in this little comfortable world. And with all that pain they had to put in, the running, the building, the hunting, the cold, you needed that seesaw to operate, that if that individual experienced more pain because those activities were advantageous to their survival, that the brain would develop an adaptive mechanism that would give them pleasure and reward them for all the pain they're doing so that they would survive. And that was, of course, incredibly useful. And we live in the first time almost in human history where the seesaw is now in the opposite direction. We live in dopamine land, pleasure, heaven, or maybe hell, depending on how you look at it. And it's the brain's only natural response is to then put us into psychological difficulty to try and get us away from this behavior in the opposite way to how it used to put us into pleasure to get us towards the behavior.
Yeah, that's well explained. So dopamine really is like pleasure, reward, motivation,
anticipation.
And so, okay, so that's D in the dose. So
yeah.
O is for oxytocin. What is that?
Oxytocin is magical. I think it's the neurotransmitter or hormone, they could be considered as both, that is most slept on in the modern world. I don't think it gets talked about enough. And I think it's arguably the neurotransmitter we're looking for most as a species, but we're getting confused and thinking that dopamine is what we're trying to attain. And to take you on that journey, from a biochemical point of view, oxytocin enables us to experience the emotion of love. Love is a very complicated topic. You could look at it down a lot of different lenses. But from a neuroscientific perspective, oxytocin is enabling us to receive love, to give love, to experience the love of things. Like even if you're literally walking in nature thinking, I love that sunset, you're generating oxytocin. And it's a chemical that's very calming for us. It's very present focused. It's very fulfilling. And in our obsession with dopamine, we now are sacrificing oxytocin. When we lie in bed, for example, we sit on the sofa next to our partner and we scroll our phones instead of interacting with them, we choose dopamine over oxytocin in that moment. And dopamine is wired within us to never actually fully satisfy us, so that our ancestors always wanted to make better fires, build better shelters, make better tools. It's not designed to fill you up. That's why no dopamine path ever fills you up. Even the healthy dopamine stuff, like progressing in your career and creating cool things, you don't have a moment where you think, I'm satisfied now. Your brain just constantly wants to keep evolving and keep progressing. Oxytocin is the opposite. There are moments where you hang out, for example, with maybe your own kid. I haven't experienced that yet, but I've hung out with lots of my family's kids. And you hang out with a kid and you're really present and you're engaged and you actually feel full. You're like, wow, this is just magic right now. I don't need loads more of it. This is just pure magic. And in this nature of reality we're currently in, where we're sacrificing oxytocin, we're therefore feeling more unfulfilled. Our nervous systems are much more restless. Our brains are much more anxious. And if we can learn to reprioritize the oxytocin, it's incredibly impactful on our experience of life.
Wow, that's such a profound insight, that oxytocin is what we need, but dopamine is what we're getting. Because dopamine is such a powerful force, but oxytocin is really like this love bonding, this connection that we're desperately craving. That's what we need. But the more powerful immediate thing is like this dopamine that's just dropped in front of us. And it's just so potent and electrifying that it seems to take, our brain seems to be wired to focus on the dopamine thing and put the connection and the human love bonding to the side.
And it's so interesting because I love watching shows about hunter-gatherers just because I'm interested in this evolutionary journey. And they, of course, are looking for dopamine a lot too. So they'll wake up in the morning and the men maybe in the tribe that are going out hunting will begin to consider how they're going to approach that. The women might be making fires or going foraging or building tools or maybe also contributing to the hunting. And in the daytime, there is this pursuit of dopamine with all of them. But in that time, they have fun, but they're just in a very deep state of concentration. But all of that concentration leads up to the evening where they have the fire with the food and they dance and they sing and they love and they laugh and they connect. And it's almost like dopamine is a precursor for their capacity to experience what they truly want, which is eating the food and loving one another and being connected and being safe. In the modern world, we're basically just waking up dopamine on our phones, do dopamine all day on our computers, and then in the evening we go back to dopamine again on the phones. And we've just forgotten that dopamine originally was so we could access love. And now dopamine is just a portal to access more dopamine. And that's why I think our being, like our deeper soul, our spirit is so unsatisfied, because it's not actually accessing the thing it deeply wants. And there are many scenarios with this dopamine oxytocin trade-off where addictions in our modern world are unmet oxytocin needs. So say, for example, pornography addiction. I myself grew up and I engaged with pornography super young, just thought everyone did, and then had to go through the process of like, how do I actually let go of pornography addiction? And when I began really exploring this, you consider pornography is very much pure dopamine, whereas intimacy with a human being would more be oxytocin. So therefore, a pornography addiction may actually be partly fueled by a lack of need in the intimacy component of your life. If you were to look down a different lens, our addiction to social media and constantly scrolling and looking at other people having fun and laughing and living their lives might be an unmet need of deep, fun social experiences with people. Our addiction to work, for example, and money might be an unmet need of feeling safe, feeling recognized for the work we do. So there's many opportunities where you think, if I could satisfy oxytocin, maybe my dopamine addictions could reduce.
Wow, you're really sending off a lot of light bulbs in my mind right now. It seems like, so dopamine is really connected to survival. And once we have those survival needs met, then we can focus more on oxytocin, which is the bonding. But, you can't really do the bonding if you're in a state of danger. That's what happens when you're in a safe zone. And you reminded me of the theories from Dr. Gabor Mate. I don't know if you're familiar with him, but he talks a lot about childhood trauma and how that leads to addiction. And you're kind of making that connection for me now. I'm like, okay, how exactly is childhood trauma connected to addiction later? Like, what's going on in the brain there? But it seems like these children who had a very traumatic childhood didn't get that proper oxytocin bonding. And then later on in life, they are chasing this dopamine or these other they're chasing that feeling later in life through substances.
Definitely. And the feeling that we're safe is a feeling that enables oxytocin to become the priority. But if you're feeling unsafe, your brain is going to stay more alert in dopamine land. Dopamine isn't a calming experience. We might be fooled into thinking that doom scrolling our phone is calming us in the evening. But in reality, when you were to measure the brain, we're just staying in beta brain waves, we're staying in dopamine, we're staying in sympathetic nervous system. We're not actually calming down. In the same way that alcohol fools us that it's calming us down, but it's not actually calming us down at all. It's just adding GABA into the brain and kind of fake calming us down. And it's really important to consider this in your day-to-day life. Am I intentionally activating the experience of love to calm my addictive nature of my brain? Because for a period of time, I think there was a percentage of society that had quite addictive brains by nature, and they may have struggled with the sugar and alcohol a little bit more. But I think with the advent of the phone and social media, almost the whole of society is moving towards a more addictive functioning brain because of the immediacy of the dopamine access we have.
Yeah, it's become just so socially acceptable to be addicted to your phone. Like you go into an airport or anywhere, a train station, every single person's on their phone, and that's just kind of what you do. If you're the one person not on your phone, you feel like you feel this almost like this angst that you need to just take it out and join the herd.
I know, and isn't that wild? Like there's this phrase, raw dogging, where you attempt to do like a flight without your phone or whatever it might be. I mean, raw dogging probably has quite a variety of meanings, but there's a social media trend where you try and take like a 7-hour flight, for example, and you're not allowed to use the screen in front of you. You're not allowed to go on your phone. You've got to try and sit there and raw dog. And I've been testing this in a variety of scenarios. When I go on like long car journeys, I'll see if I can do no music, no podcast, no phone, and just be in the quiet. Or, for example, I'll leave my house with my credit card so I have money, and I'll go out to get like a coffee and go to a bookshop and go to a supermarket to buy my lunch or whatever it might be. But I will leave the phone at home. So I'm forced into lots of moments where I have to sit and be bored, and I'll kind of get I don't even drink coffee anymore, but get whatever I do get, matcha or something like that, and sit there and just be bored. And it's almost counterculture now to sit and have a coffee and not be on a phone, which is just so crazy that that's our world. But I personally believe, based on all this analysis and research into brain chemistry, that moving towards these slow states is exactly what our brain needs.
That's very good. I think people are waking up to it. I'm hopeful. I've met some young people that have surprised me that weren't on their phones. You know, I kind of assumed that all young people were just addicted to their phones 24/7 and like very socially awkward. But I have met a few young people that completely changed my perception. They didn't have phones. They thought that social media was the worst. And so that kind of restored my hope in some way. I hope there's like a movement of younger people to just get offline and meet in the real world.
Yeah, it's definitely, there's a changing tide. I think the percentages obviously are still more towards spending time on the phone, but there is a changing tide. There's a lot of teenagers wanting to get dumb phones and actually hang out with each other. And I train a huge amount of schools in the local area here. All the kids go through this dose process, and there's loads of kids out in the skate park, out in the nature. We do this thing called Forts with Friends, where the younger kids, kind of 10 to 13-year-olds, have to go into the local forest and build forts like they're actually hunter-gatherers. And the forest is absolutely covered in them. So there are kids that want to do other things, for sure, kids and teenagers.
Yeah, I just got hired to do photography for this event where the high school kids were dissecting pig brains. They were, it was a really cool event, and I'd had to take photos of it. And I was really impressed by none of the kids took out their phone and filmed anything. They were all super engaged. They were laughing. They were very polite and having fun. So, you know, a couple of experiences have changed my perception on this younger generation. You know, maybe they are more focused on being present. You know, there is hope. There is some light at the end of the tunnel.
And I sometimes think the generation that experiences maybe the most intense experience one side is almost going to be the generation that births the other side. But the whole reason, I'm technically obviously a little bit older than that generation, but I still had an iPhone from 11 years old. So to me, my whole world has been inside an iPhone. And I think that younger generation is going to birth a new paradigm, which is cool. And I think the more we focus on the good and what they're heading towards rather than talking about the problem, the more we're going to manifest that into reality anyway.
Yeah, I feel very lucky because I didn't get a smartphone till I was in my late 20s. And
Yeah, that is a little different.
the crazy thing is my career is like online now. And
Yeah.
I didn't get on this stuff until I was in my mid to late 20s. Didn't really have social media in high school or college. And I feel very fortunate to have grown up in a time before the madness. But
I can't
unfortunately,
even imagine that. For me, how I grew up, being at college or university or something without social media, that just seems crazy. It seems like some kind of nostalgic movie I could create in my mind where everyone's kind of hanging out and talking, and it seems like a cool world. Maybe that world's going to kind of return in a new way.
yeah, for some reason on my social media, I keep getting these very old nostalgic videos of high
Yeah.
school in 2001, last day of high school, and somebody brings a camcorder into high school, and everybody just seems so like mentally healthy and present. When the camera goes on them, they're waving and they're like, "Hey, what's up?" And nobody cares about their brand or where's this video going to end
Yeah.
up. Like that
I
thought
know
doesn't even
everyone's a
cross their
little bit
mind.
more free. And dopamine, not all dopamine, but the quick sort of dopamine by nature ever so slightly imprisons us in many ways. For example, I really struggled with cannabis for a long time. And whilst I kind of convinced myself for a long period of time it was so good for my creativity and all these different things, I was slightly in the prison of cannabis where I was constantly having to think about it and measure out when I was going to interact with it. And it did feel as I came away from it, almost like I was escaping some kind of prison. And I think whether it's the nature of social media that's made us more conscious of our behavior, so if we worried about that, and that nostalgic example you said that wasn't the case, or whether it's different addictions like the alcohol, whatever it might be, it doesn't allow us to be truly free as a human being. And in that video we made, the whole idea was that their souls are either free or they're not free. And I can't think of many humans that wouldn't want to be on the path of pursuing more freedom. It's a pretty nice feeling.
Yeah, one of my favorite quotes from Terence McKenna is he says, "If you don't have a plan, you become a part of somebody else's plan."
Ah,
Which,
interesting.
right now it feels like once you go on your phone, you feel like a rat in a maze.
I know.
I'm very aware of that. There's an algorithm that's just kind of playing puppeteer with my brain.
I know. And it's so good. Even with my awareness and study into it, it still can get me. And then I'm like, wow, it literally got me. It's just like in control of my mind. And I put the phone down, lock the apps, and just like get away from it.
It's very sticky. So
Yeah.
we've covered dopamine, oxytocin, and serotonin. Next big one.
Yeah. So serotonin, again, a beautiful chemical, a chemical that would absolutely love us to be lying down on the floor of a forest, staring up at the trees with someone that we care for, eating some fruit, some sun hitting our face, and then go and swim in a nice river. That would be serotonin's dream. And it's a chemical that's fascinating. 90% of it is made within the gut, 10% in the brain. The serotonin within the gut doesn't directly cross the blood-brain barrier into the brain, but you have this magical system called the vagus nerve that's connecting the brain and body together and reading the state of the body and relaying that information to the brain. And this neurotransmitter really wants our body to be at peace and be happy. It wants good food to be in our guts, utilizing all those different nutrients for key functions within our immune system and our vitality. It wants sunlight on our skin. It wants naps. It wants big sleeps. It wants nice, calm breathing patterns. And ultimately, that results in a nice, calm, stable mood, good, consistent energy, calm thoughts within your mind. Unfortunately, obviously, with the nature of this chemical, is we are moving slightly away from those things. Our food is different. Quantity of sunlight is different. Our time in nature is different. Our sleep is different. But serotonin is one of those chemicals where you can make good tweaks on each of those different things and experience amazing tangible benefits as a result.
I was blown away to realize that serotonin is the main factor in both psychedelics and MDMA.
Mm.
That's what gets manipulated the most. Two very different experiences. But I always thought it was dopamine, but then I was kind of blown away to know that psychedelics mainly play on serotonin.
Yeah, and psychedelics, well, there's an interesting interplay here between psychedelics and MDMA. Obviously, those experiences are different from one another, but both are very different from the experience of something like cocaine or alcohol. Cocaine and alcohol are very dopamine dominant, pleasure seeking. I need more of this, give me more, turns you into quite a fast human being. MDMA and psychedelics, whilst they are different, they might put you more towards a state of either human connection outwardly or a lot of inward connection. But I really see it as they are awakening the body and giving the body an opportunity to have its say on how experience should be ran. And I think we're very stuck in our head as a species now. We literally live sitting down all the time with our bodies sitting still, with our heads operating at hyperspeed. And I think our bodies are desperate for an opportunity to share what they want. They want love and connection and to feel deep appreciation and to have the nature, the sunlight, the movement, rhythm. They're desperate for that real human side of us. And I think sometimes those sort of experiences, and I know they're being used therapeutically, offer that opportunity.
So, what kind of behaviors lower serotonin?
So some of the key ones: ultra processed foods, super disruptive because it's very hard for your body to detoxify the ultra processed foods. All of your really artificial things with lots of different ingredients in, they're going to be very disruptive. The serotonin is literally built within your gut lining, within the walls of your gut. And the toxic nature of ultra processed foods creates really, really tiny microscopic holes within your gut lining, which then creates things like leaky gut, where someone has looser stools and their gut just doesn't feel like it functions very well. And with leaky gut, it's therefore very hard for all that serotonin within the intestinal lining walls to be able to build itself, because there's now all these things disrupting it. So the food is a massive, massive factor. Sunlight is a huge factor. So just a lack of time getting sun, even if it's daylight, in our eyes and on our skin, is crucial. And then the big one is rest. We don't really rest anymore. We rest whilst stimulating our brains on the sofa, like TV, whilst we have our phone in our hand, just sort of simultaneously smashing our brain chemistry. And we've also got an immense hustle culture because of dopamine that means we think we always have to be achieving more and more and more. And yeah, that inability to rest, the disruption from a sunlight perspective, and the ultra processed food, these are the things that we want to try and become more conscious of.
Yeah, a few years ago, I did a video on SSRIs, serotonin reuptake inhibitors, and there was a massive study that came out of Australia about how that there is no chemical imbalance, that's all a myth, and that trying to approach psychological issues as if it's just a matter of tweaking certain chemicals can get us into a lot of trouble.
Yeah, it's very reductionist.
Yeah, it's almost like this extreme scientific materialistic worldview has broken down every aspect of life into these like mechanical parts, I guess. And humans are not machines, and it's not, if your life sucks, boosting up serotonin is not going to really do much for you. I mean, you need to get your life together. That's going to make you feel better. Very concerning to try to fix psychological or spiritual issues with a material solution. That doesn't seem to ever work.
Yeah, and this is something I myself constantly am considering with this dose model, because of course the simplification of humans down to neurotransmitters is a very huge simplification of an unbelievably unique being that we are, that I believe has a soul and has an energy form deep within us and are connected to some kind of higher energy. And I think purely pursuing an artificial path where, for example, we balance the dopamine with medication and the serotonin, and these kind of paths, I think are tricky. I think they might serve in very unique cases where an individual is deeply in pain. But I think, as to your scenario there, if someone's life is not going well, just a little bit of serotonin won't fix it. And I think there needs to be a more holistic view as to their life. What am I in the pursuit of at the moment? How connected are my relationships? How in service am I to others? Serotonin things will help. Good sleep will definitely help. Good nutrition will definitely help. Sunlight will definitely help. But it's much bigger as an idea. And these are just sort of breaking it down into substructures.
Yeah, I'm curious to know if there's any like spiritual practices, or is there any like studies that show that people with certain spiritual practices or maybe a greater purpose than themselves, do they have a better balance of these chemicals in their body?
Well, to the point of the conversation before, and I'm going deep into this in my second book at the moment, oxytocin is the hormone that's generated through the spiritual practice. It's love. It's through spiritual practice, you experience deep appreciation. You experience greater clarity on your purpose and your requirement as a species to serve and give love to other people and not focus so selfishly on your own experience. And if it was to be a religious type experience, which obviously would have its alternative types of views and people have different opinions, but the experience of being with a group of people, celebrating together, celebrating one another, having conversations, singing together, praying together, that is a great experience for a human species, regardless of the religious nature of it. And I really see these chemicals almost as dopamine is about me and oxytocin is about we. And typically spiritual practices move you more towards we. And my partner and I didn't grow up as religious people. My parents weren't religious. We didn't have that nature of God in our mind, but gradually are moving very, very much in that direction. And we can only see, both in the research, but also in our own subjective opinion, significant improvements in our mental state as a result.
Well, that's beautiful to hear coming from a neuroscientist. You know, I always find it very refreshing when a hardcore scientist makes that bridge to spirituality, because for so long there seemed to be no place for God in academia or these like laboratories. You know, any talk of woo-woo was considered like taboo. And there's a saying that...
nature. Sorry.
Yeah. Oh, there's a saying that that you made me think of. It's traditions are experiments that worked. And so a lot of religious ceremonies and things that we see, worship, perhaps they might not make sense from our materialist worldview, but if you look at them from a zoomed out lens of just this evolutionary lens of trying to get your genes as far into the future as possible, the idea of community and worshiping something greater than yourselves and loving your neighbor, these principles are very survival enhancing, promoting.
They are.
Yeah.
Very survival enhancing. And I think the lack of connection to something is fueling so much of our pain. It's making us feel lonely. It's making us act in a way that is less coherent to making our life align to what's really good for us rather than what just like feels good in the now. And whilst from a scientific point of view, of course, it's hard to prove God. That's a tricky thing to do within science, at least currently. Let's see what happens over the next kind of 10 to 20 years with all this AI research and scientific advancement. But when I look at it, and I spend huge amounts of time outside in nature on my own with no phone, just walking and wandering and allowing my brain to think and also connect with something that feels bigger than me. At the minimum, that could be the fact nature is alive around me and nature is bigger than me. And then you can kind of take that to new levels. When I was walking once prior to necessarily believing in God, I was thinking about, and this seems so niche, but I was thinking about the fact I have a liver in my body because I'd struggled a lot with drinking way too much alcohol. And I was thinking, oh, my poor little liver is in there and it's taken some real hitting over the last decade. And I was coming away and I was moving towards a healthier lifestyle. And then I was thinking about the fact there's small cells in my liver that help that liver to function, that provide part of the detoxification process as different compounds come in. And they're these little cells that arguably are having their own experience of life. They're alive, that little cell, and they're in the liver. And I was thinking, wow, if I could communicate with that cell, that'd be so unusual. But of course, I can't communicate with that cell. But if you could, and I was to try and explain to that cell, who can only see its tiny little experience of life, that by the way, cell, you're living in this thing called a liver, which is this thing that detoxifies different compounds that are coming into the human body. And obviously it would be very difficult for it to comprehend that. And then if you were to share with that liver, by the way, you're actually living in this thing called a human being. That human being is this being that traverses this thing called Earth. Obviously the liver, it'd be uncomprehendable because it can only know it's the liver. And if you continue to scale that up, there's no reason as to why we as the human being aren't experiencing the exact same thing where we can't see what's above us because our experience is limited just as the liver cell was and the liver is. And that idea has led to me just thinking that if you weren't to believe there's something bigger than us, it's almost ego leading you down that path to consider that we are the highest state of consciousness. That would be, in my opinion at least, ego that would push you towards that. And I think the idea that there's this bigger consciousness that we just are struggling to fully comprehend is interesting and mystical and powerful to be in service to.
That's beautiful. I just heard this quote about faith that really resonated. It was, faith is when you come to the edge of everything that you know and you take a step off that cliff, you know one of two things is going to happen. Either you're going to have something solid to stand on, or you're going to be taught how to fly.
Oh,
and I just thought that was so beautiful because on a higher level, like even if you make a mistake or something goes wrong, faith is knowing that you're going to get through this and you're going to be taught a profound lesson. It's almost like F around and find out, the more things, religion has always struggled to answer one question, and that is, why is there unjust suffering in the world?
Yeah,
and
it's tricky.
It's an almost impossible question to answer. I think about it all the time because literally every day I'll post something on Instagram, and every single day there's a response that says, well, why don't you tell this to kids with no legs? Or, I'll say something motivational or inspirational, and they'll say, well, why don't you explain that to somebody in Gaza that just got their house blown up? And it's a really hard question to answer. Like, what would I say? Sometimes a lot of these people are trolls and I don't think they're doing it in good faith, but it is a good question. Like, what would you say? How do you explain why horrible things happen to good people? And I think the only way to look at it is on some extremely higher level. There's chaos on one level, but on another level, there's harmony. And on another level, death is not the end. Suffering is not the end. There's always, it's like this ebb and flow of life. Life does not end and begin with death and birth.
I also agree with that. And I think this is where there's this unique yin and yang interplay between energy in the universe. And we're obviously experiencing very specific microscopic moments of that yin and yang with, for example, one of those comments, which is painful because obviously you have immense empathy for the people that are on the side that's experiencing more pain. It's unbelievable that people have to navigate that. And we all in our own lives have different moments that are more challenging as well. And I think that model of yin and yang balancing out, I think the brain is constantly trying to do that. And I think that's why sometimes things get more intense and better simultaneously. There's almost this weird back and forth at the same time. And I almost think from this brain chemistry lens that our heart and brain are experiencing a yin and yang sort of dopamine versus oxytocin interplay where they're trying to balance one another out. And currently the brain and dopamine seems to be very much in the lead, and we need this resurgence of the heart to guide us.
Yeah, in our collaboration, when I was trying to show the brain chemicals in the caveman, for anybody who hasn't seen it, we show cavemen and we show above their head their dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin, and endorphins, and how their levels are changing throughout the video. And so when they were in the natural world, I wanted to show that there was like a solid baseline, and that the chemicals were always there, but they weren't to the max, but there was a solid baseline. And when they went into this artificial cube where their emotions were being manipulated, I wanted to show like just this like crazy fluctuation of their chemicals going to the max and then just getting utterly depleted and kind of like piano keys or something.
Yeah, I love it. When I saw it, I was like, that is exactly what it is. So that's so good. And they were kind of like, it was like a wave, wasn't it? When Carl saw his brother and his brother was like in difficulty. And
Because that's how it feels when you eat the really sugary food or look at the pornographic image. It's just like this overwhelming sensation. I mean, you're just jolted in your chair. It's like the sugary food just takes you to another world, and then you come plummeting back down, and you're like, "Oh man, I'm still in this dirty apartment, and I feel like crap."
I know.
Well, maybe I'll have another bite, and I'll go back up to paradise. It's this
Sadly,
extreme fluctuation.
the brain doesn't want you to go to that artificial paradise, so it keeps making the low lower and lower to try and say, no, that was wrong. No, that was wrong. And it makes it more and more intense. Like when you first get drunk when you're 16, 17, you go to a party or whatever it might be, the low isn't that severe from it, partly because your body's better at metabolizing alcohol. But I also think partly this mechanism is learning over time, wow, this is getting worse and worse and worse and worse for our life. And something deeper within you is trying to say, no, please don't do this anymore. And that interplay of these neurotransmitters is just so fascinating to listen to and understand.
Yeah, there's a great chapter in Atomic Habits by James Clear about, he talks about how to pull the rewards from the future and into the present moment so that the painful thing is not so painful. So when you're going to the gym, you become much more aware of like, okay, this is going to benefit me later. And then vice versa, the really quote unquote pleasurable thing that you would have done now, you need to be very aware of the pain that it's going to cause you later on. So if you become more aware of the pain of that donut you're going to eat, you're probably not going to eat it. And if you become more aware of the great benefits of going to the gym, you're going to go to the gym. But without that awareness, you're kind of like, oh, why am I going to the gym? I mean, it's painful. It's uncomfortable,
I know, where does the motivation come from? That is very true. And I always share in our main kind of dopamine keynote I do in lots of companies and schools, I share this sentence that laziness, which is something we all experience at times, laziness is focusing too much on the effort of a task and not enough on the outcome. And whenever you actually think about a task, even something like cleaning your house, if you think about the effort, then you think can't be bothered. If you think about the outcome of the clean house, you take action. And that immersion in the outcome of the decisions you're making is what creates this anticipatory dopamine to, yes, I'm going to go get that thing done so I can feel that reward. Whereas in the modern world, we're so obsessed with, oh, that's too much effort. That's too much effort. Starting that new career is too much effort. Creating that post for social media is too much effort. Whatever it might be, anything, food, gym, all of it, going for the walk. And I think it's important for your brain to immerse itself more often in the outcome of that which you desire so you actually take action.
You just made me think about dopamine. I mean, not dopamine. Growth mindset. Because if you speak to somebody's effort, they will perform so much better. If you say you did great on that effort, but if you speak to the outcome or the identity, you're so smart, you're so athletic, you're so talented, people will shy away from doing hard things because they don't want their identity to get tainted by doing something that proves that they're not smart. So they'll shy away from tackling the hard things. So yeah, it's like you can gamify this outcome reward system in almost any situation to get the behaviors and outcomes that you want, I guess.
You can, and I'm constantly thinking about this. When I finish this conversation, for example, it's the evening here in the UK, and I'll need to cook a healthy dinner, which is going to require effort. I'm going to want to go on a walk of some kind because I've basically sat on this chair all day since I went to the gym when I woke up. So that's 10 hours of sitting, terrible. And so I'm going to want to cook a healthy dinner, go for a walk, and convince myself to read my book in the evening instead of just nail social media videos. And all of those things my brain doesn't necessarily want to do. It would love to just sit down on the sofa and just start nailing the videos. But I keep consistently thinking, what is going to create the life where I just have great mental health and my work goes great and my relationship feels great and I can immerse myself in that outcome desire. And then I just try and utilize that as fuel to make the decision that I know will serve it.
That takes a lot of willpower.
Yeah, it does. And it doesn't always happen. Obviously, I have my challenges.
Yeah, I found that my willpower is at an all-time high right when I wake up, and it
Mhm.
kind of wanes throughout the day. So I'll try to stack the hardest things in the beginning of the day. So like I'll wake up, I'll go to the gym immediately. I'll
Mhm.
fast till the afternoon. I'll do my
Yeah.
hardest work in the morning. And then if I'm listening to things or reading things, it's very academic, intellectual. But then as the day goes on, I allow myself to listen to some podcasts and then some comedy and then some political nonsense. And then by the end of the day, I'm eating dessert and watching reality TV, to be honest.
It's
But
just like,
as long as I got that, as long as I stacked the hard things, I got outside, I did the responsible things in the morning, I'll allow myself a little bit of irresponsible brain rot
indulgence.
at the end of the day.
What does your irresponsible brain rot look like? How unhealthy is that dessert, and how unhealthy is the show that's on the screen?
um, Not that, I'm not a fan of eating unhealthy at all, but I'll
Uh-huh.
have some chocolate or some ice cream or
Yeah.
something, a little bowl, and then
Cool.
usually watching some fairly trash TV like a Great British Baking Show, or that's not really that trashy, but
I mean, that's not too bad. Better than social media videos.
yeah. But then it's very hard to not once the meal's gone. This is like speaks to stacking dopamine
Yeah.
because you're watching TV, you got your food, and you're with your loved ones, so that's a lot of dopamine right there.
Yeah.
That's like three things.
Yeah.
And
It's the
then once the
triple
food's
hit.
done, you're kind of your fingers are fidgeting around because you're like, I need one more thing. Like I had three things and now I only have two.
I know. It's tricky. And we find it harder to sit in that state of stillness now where things get a little bit boring. Even just watching the TV is now almost too boring. There was that really viral video this week on social media where apparently Netflix and Amazon Prime and stuff are now creating shows with the knowledge that people are going to watch their phones whilst watching the shows. They're dumbing down the TV in order for you to be able to pay attention to two things at once. And that's because we're finding TV too boring because our concentration won't work. And we have this thing in our research lab we call the boredom barrier, where at about 15 minutes, someone will settle in a state of less stimulation, but we just don't seem to want to wait to get there because it's harder. It's a little bit uncomfortable. And we operate so frequently in these beta brainwaves where our brain is just tinging along all day. Then if you attempt to put an older movie on that's a bit slow and it's not meeting that level of stimulation you're at, you think, oh, I can't bother with this. Boom, here's the phone. I'll keep myself up there. But so much of the love you feel for your life, the appreciation, the connection, the creativity, it's found in those lower stimulation states. So it is so worth trying to access them, even if it just means watching a movie and not having your phone in your hand at the same time, just slightly simplifying it. You don't have to go and become a monk and meditate in the mountains, but you can move in the right direction.
That's so funny because it is really hard to watch movies now for some reason.
I know.
It's like a new skill. But there was a movie that I really wanted to watch, and I was like, I'm not going to eat and I'm not going to be on my phone. I'm going to watch this movie. And it was
Okay.
quite difficult, but it was a very good movie and it was rewarding. It was called Silence that came out
Okay.
in 2016.
Cool.
But and then I remember being very proud of myself, and I like went around and I told people about the movie. I'm like, guys, this movie's really awesome. And the funny thing is, most of the time, if I'm on my phone and eating, I don't even know what I watched. Like if people were like, "What'd you watch last night?" I'd be like, I have no idea.
I know, it's wild, isn't it? It's so easily done as well. And that feeling you had, you said the word proud, that is the greatest indicator of whether your dopamine is at a healthy or an unhealthy state, because we can obviously look on Instagram, like I'll even share them, like lists of this is good dopamine, this is bad dopamine, and we can go into all the research and what's good and what's bad. But ultimately, if you feel deep guilt and shame, not good dopamine. If you feel proud, good dopamine. And you can then uniquely observe your own behavior. And if you try and pursue the path of feeling pride rather than guilt, it makes a big difference to your brain chemical balance.
Yeah, not too much pride though, because then
Yeah, no, you
pride
don't
can
want to
get
go
you in
into
trouble.
super pride where you're an arsehole.
All right, so we've covered dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin, and now we have endorphins.
Endorphins are a great chemical that, again, is getting slightly underactivated. with all four of these chemicals, dopamine is the one we've hacked, where oxytocin, serotonin, and endorphins are the ones that are getting deprioritized by the dopaminergic lifestyle. And endorphins are here really to help us cope with stress and physical pain. That's their evolutionary advantage. And when we faced intense stresses for our ancestors of fighting other animals, fighting each other, hunting for days, trying to survive, that was a physically and mentally very intense experience. And endorphins would come into the brain during that intense physical action to take stress out the mind and pain out the body to help you survive that situation, so that you run away from the bear with a clear thinking process and a body that's not thinking, oh, I've got a stitch, I can't be bothered to keep running. And in the modern world, stress has become very different. We might be stressed by a specific email or a political opinion or a financial thing or an argument with our partner about something very nuanced. And in these moments of stress in the modern day, we remain dead sedentary. We don't move the body. And the body for 300,000 years moved to get the stress out of it. It didn't stay still. And the kind of sedentary way in which we operate now, and I feel this myself. I, of course, sit down all day like everyone else and stare at a screen all day. And the sedentary nature of life now is creating greater stress and greater kind of frustration and tension and anger within our being. And we need to physically get it out of us. And that's what the endorphins want us to do.
So the term I've often heard that's connected to endorphins is the runner's high. Well, what exactly is going on when you get a runner's high?
Yeah, so your brain hasn't got the ancient circuitry that understands you're on a 15-kilometer run just because you want to get a good Strava score or impress someone, or maybe it's just for some kind of feeling of accomplishment. It instead thinks, holy shit, I've been running for 15 kilometers and there must be some reason why this being is decided. Are they starving, hungry? Are they like running away from some kind of threat? Are they looking for somewhere new to live? And in that moment, the brain will be considering, wow, this is pretty stressful, both on the mind and the body. And it's going to need to add endorphins to create a state of euphoria to help you continue to run. And that's why runner's high doesn't come from 2 minutes of running, but it comes from prolonged running as the body enters extreme physical exertion. And it's a great state to access. Like, natural euphoria through physical action is good for us as a human, and something that annoyingly requires loads of effort to get hold of. So occasionally we need to figure out, we don't have to run 15 kilometers, but we just need to think, how am I physically getting stress and this tension out of me?
Okay, that's great. So we've kind of run through the dose, and now I'd love to hear your protocol. Is there like a one-size-fits-all approach, or is it you like look at an individual and be like, oh, they're clearly missing dopamine here, or let's boost their oxytocin here? Is it, what's the approach?
We take people through, if it was public individuals rather than people in our research studies, so for example, people listening to this show today, we initially would give them some baseline metrics just to get an idea of what chemical might be high, what might be low, what might be imbalanced, out of balance. If, for example, we were considering the dopamine pathway, we'd look at the consistency of their motivation, how consistently they feel they can get themselves to do things that are effort. And then we'd also look at their attention span. They would score themselves from 1 to 10 on each of those markers. This doesn't provide a scientific psychometric metric, but it's just like an initial indication, okay, this is what the dopamine might be looking like. Then with that, say, for example, their dopamine was particularly low, the main protocol we would initiate into their life is what we call take action when you wake, where from the moment you open your eyes, you don't have to do it at speed, but you have to pursue something that is effortful before you experience any form of easy pleasure. So that means before you experience caffeine or sugar or social media, you have to have earned reward in some way. And it could be getting ready for your day, having your shower, making your bed, brushing your teeth. It could be getting outside for a walk. It could be getting your kids ready for school. That would be effort. So it's simply understanding where's their motivation, where's their attention. If it's lower, we're going to focus on take action when you wake and reducing quick dopamine first thing.
That's brilliant. So second you get out of bed, you do some push-ups, some yoga, some stretching. Is there a certain type of movement that kind of works the best?
It's really just anything you could consistently commit to rather than a specific type of movement. The goal would be how can I get myself to make sure I do this every day? For me, for example, I like to train, but I find going to the gym on my own and lifting weights for an hour really freaking boring. I used to like it when I was a bit younger, but I just find it so boring now. And I find the like ego-led nature of staring at myself in the mirror just like not great for my mind. And I would rather, for example, go to the park and do just like 15 minutes of pull-ups and some dips and stuff like that. And it won't be, say, the quantity that would make me some huge, giant, ripped guy, but it is something I could consistently commit to. So that's what I've chosen. So if you were to ask yourself, what is a realistic, consistent amount that you could do sort of 5 days a week, and then choose that as your path rather than the, I'm going to go 90 minutes, lift heavy weights, then absolutely hate that tomorrow, then maybe do it 4 days later, and then some morning scroll my phone. That's when you get the big turbulent brain chemical levels. So I would say open your eyes. Initially, the game plan is just don't go on your phone, brush your teeth, splash your face with cold water, and make your bed. So then there's just like dopamine has been activated. Just going to the bathroom, coming back, making your bed. Then after that, some form of movement. It could be a gentle walk. It doesn't have to be something unbelievably hard, but it has to be something that makes you feel a sense of reward through effort, not through social media videos or email or WhatsApp or whatever could stimulate you.
Yeah, I find the hardest, there's so much resistance because there's a lot of friction to get to the good habit. It's like, I got to drive 20 minutes to the gym, and then I don't have the right gym clothes, and there's all these barriers. And I find that by reducing as much friction as you can to get to those good habits is really helpful. And then, so like you want to have your workout clothes right there when you wake up, and then you want to have, you want to go to the closest gym, or you want to know where you're going to go before you wake up. So you're not spending 30 minutes trying to figure out what workout am I doing? Where am I going? Like, you know where you're going, you know what routine you were going to hit. Maybe you even have a list of the exercises you're going to do. So you just, it's very easy to just get into it. And then vice versa with bad habits, you want to create as much friction and barriers between you and those bad habits as possible. So I mean, literally, I've taken my phone and I've thrown it out a window onto like the grass outside. And then,
Nice.
in order to go on the phone, you have to like do this very demeaning walk out of the room, down the stairs. And then by the time you get halfway down the stairs, you're like, what am I doing? Like, I don't even need to go on my phone. Just that barrier.
It's good to create that.
Yeah, that friction is really important.
Yeah, reduced friction for the desires, increased friction for the non-desires. I think that's a smart play for sure. And it's very important because when you wake up, you said earlier that your willpower is highest when you wake. Part of the restorative nature of sleep is it's helping your dopamine system replenish itself because of the lack of stimulation, and the mechanism is restoring. And then we have this area of the brain, the anterior mid-cingulate cortex, your AMCC, where your willpower is literally housed. And your dopamine level in your brain, in your hypothalamus and your ventral tegmental area, is going to impact how able you are to initiate willpower. So your dopamine factory, effectively we could call it, is going to impact your AMCC, your willpower activation. If, for example, you wake up and you just think, it's harmless, just a quick check of my email, my WhatsApp, my Instagram, and you go on it, immediately you spike crash the dopamine, and then your dopamine center's capacity to ensure your AMCC activates when you need to do something hard is suddenly reduced. The odds of you making the right decision are reduced, which is why we call it take action when you wake, because the effort required to go to the gym or go for a walk or whatever is annoying. It's nice to just lie in bed, nail your phone. But in the morning, you've got the greatest opportunity to make the right decision. Then when you're making the decision, you're generating a ton of natural dopamine, and then you're adding willpower to your day rather than taking it away. And this is how you then get this positive domino effect.
Wow, when you put it like that, that's definitely going to change my behavior, because sometimes you think, okay, one quick look at Instagram is harmless, or maybe you even convince yourself that you have to do a little work on Instagram. I have to go on. Like, I can't.
That's a classic.
Our brain plays funny tricks on us where we're like, I have to do this bad behavior, when you know that really you don't have to do it.
I call it in my mind the dopamine devil.
It's like, oops, the tub of sugar fell in our food. I guess we have to eat the sugar now. Like,
I know.
What are we gonna do?
And it's so, dopamine specifically is so good at tricking you. tricking you with your consumption of lots of different things, with caffeine consumption or alcohol consumption or going on your social media. It like creates these illusions within your mind that feel like the truth but are actually lies. And as I say, your greatest opportunity to fight the dopamine devil is when you open your eyes. You got to take it.
Yeah, there's a theory that a lot of the ADHD that we see in the world now, this prescription and diagnosis of ADHD, every kid has it now. But it's because they're surrounded by so much sugar and stimulation and all these things that they're so stimulated that when they are shown a dry lecture or they're told to sit still in class, it's nearly impossible. They can't do it because it's so boring compared to their other stimulation. So they're jittering around and they can't focus. And then they're saying, why can't you focus? You must have ADD. And then they're prescribed Adderall or Ritalin. And they've found that, no, they don't have a disease really. All you have to do is just take away that stimulus and suddenly they can focus on things that were a little bit more boring before, you know?
Definitely. And ADHD is an interesting one because ADHD was a thing prior to mass stimulation. And there were certain individuals that were very hyperactive at school and very inattentive. And that was a percentage of the population. But obviously now suddenly the percentage has changed so drastically that it would suggest there's some kind of behavioral thing taking place that's altering the rate. And original, let's say, genetic ADHD, although it's not scientifically called that, if you were born with hyperactivity and inattention, you do have a slightly lower dopamine baseline. So you are more vulnerable to finding things very stimulating and experiencing big fluctuations of hyperfocus, then deep inattention. And the nature of the way in which young people live, and all of us live now, is we are physically altering our dopamine baseline through overstimulating the pathway and wearing out the engine and creating low dopamine within our brains that's making us all inattentive and hyperactive. And I would almost say the modern thing should be called a new name. Kids should be getting diagnosed with something like behavioral inattention rather than ADHD. And if it was something they had from birth, maybe it's much more likely they have ADHD. But if suddenly in the last 6 months, like, wow, suddenly my kid's got ADHD, maybe it's more of a behavioral based thing.
That's a good point. So you chose dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin, endorphins in your protocol. Are there any other brain chemicals or hormones that didn't quite make the cut, but you think that we should pay attention to?
Yeah, great question. I chose dose. I studied dose so much in my undergraduate. I didn't know it as dose. That acronym was never mentioned, but I studied these hormones apart from one another, then discovered the magical acronym. And the key ones I'm very interested in now are GABA and glutamate, which have a kind of opposing mechanism within them. One is an inhibitory neurotransmitter, which is GABA. One is an excitatory neurotransmitter, which is glutamate. And they're super fascinating. One is effectively an accelerator mechanism, and one's a braking mechanism within the brain. The glutamate is the accelerator mechanism that's really crucial for our capacity to make decisions and get us to have thought and create things and do things, which is, of course, crucial. And then the GABA is the opposite. It's a very calming one that slows us down and allows our nervous system to rest. Both equally have a lot of importance. But like all of these different interplays, we're becoming dominant in different neurotransmitters. And glutamate is firing like crazy because we're making so many decisions and we're doing so much. Even if the so much isn't necessarily good things, we're still doing so much from the moment we wake in comparison to what our ancestors would have experienced. With all the decisions we make on our phones, our work, our thinking, our conversation, our political beliefs, it's just so much thinking. And this is effectively generating lots of these glutamate molecules in our synapses, and they're actually generating in such abundance that they're blocking pathways within our synaptic structures, which is creating this sort of like foggy, I can't really think, really like full brain feeling where your brain literally feels full of liquid almost. That's a tricky state, and GABA is the opposite. It has this beautiful calming effect within the brain and it slows everything back down, and I'm very curious about this interplay at the moment.
I was just looking up really quick, I thought GLP-1s were related to this. I thought the
No,
G stood for
sadly not,
no.
but that would be interesting.
Yeah, because GLP-1s are like a natural thing in our body that tells us that we're full.
Yeah.
Let's see, what is it? What does GLP-1 stand for? It stands for glucagon-like peptide 1.
Yeah, it's a
Not really
natural
sure.
hormone within the gut that enables us to have satiation, like fullness.
Yeah, so now that's kind of getting gamified and
Yeah, another thing in this beautiful artificial world we're all trying to figure out. And again, coming all the way back to your chaos and order theory of yin and yang, we've created such ridiculously hard to manage artificial food that we're having to yin and yang that towards something that literally stops you desiring it because it's too hard to not desire. And this is tricky for the human being. And of course, I am a huge fan of the pursuit of the natural path to get all these hormones to work in balance.
I wonder if this is going to start a war between giant industries. You know, you have this huge GLP-1 industry, and then that could kill the profits of like these food
It's
companies.
happening in the States. Apparently, Dunkin' Donuts is seeing changes in their profit margins because of GLP-1s.
Oh my
Apparently,
gosh.
there's like a really noticeable change. And apparently, Nestle are actually building kind of, because it's not going to be good for their lovely food that they like to sell, and they're going to build these kind of GLP-1 sort of Ozempic based foods for those individuals. So like bars and stuff. If you don't eat much, eat this, and then you can still eat their ultra processed foods. So it's, oh man, it's maybe they'll find a way to connect to one another, these different industries, or maybe they'll battle it out.
They almost
I'm
kind
wondering
of
when the GLP-1 for social media addiction is going to come out, and you're going to inject something that makes you not desire your phone.
they almost kind of need each other. You know, one industry depends on the other.
They do.
I'm sure they'll figure out some way to both be profitable, unfortunately.
Yeah, I've no doubt about that, sadly.
You know, it's kind of like how the pharmaceutical industries have bought a lot of the main food producing companies, like Bayer Pharma has bought Monsanto. So you have the company that provides the cure is the one that's producing the sickness through the food. And it's just like perverse cycle of, you know, a patient cured is a customer lost. So you want to keep these people in this like perpetual cycle, like a hamster in a wheel of just, they're just sick enough that they're still alive. They're just in debt enough that they can just keep making their payments. It's just kind of like they're right on the edge of, you know, they're not free at all, but they're not dead. they're just.
I know, man, and it deeply, like on these long quiet walks I have, like it pains my soul that this is the reality humanity is having to navigate. It pains me so deeply, and this is why, for example, I'm not dedicating my career to attempting to fight the system or legislation or try and create like new rules. The whole goal is to find a way to awaken the spirit within you that gives you the capacity to navigate this world, because it can be navigated. It's freaking difficult now. It is so hard with all this temptation everywhere, but it can be navigated. And arguably today is the easiest it's ever going to be again, because it's only going to become more tricky to navigate the artificial nature of our universe. And today is the day that you then start making the annoying decision to resist the temptation of your phone for 30 seconds in the morning, to train your brain to have the capacity to resist whatever is required to thrive.
Yeah, I mean, painting that broad brush of evolutionary lens over this, looking at it from evolutionary terms, kind of makes you think about, is there like a giant filter happening right now where some people who can't show enough discipline will not be able to pass their genes on to the next, you know, we're like having this huge birth crisis right now, or this
It's true.
population is about to plummet. I think we're going to peak at 9 billion in 2040, but it's projected, you know, if you look at birth rates, we're way
some
below
countries
replacement.
are really on the low replacement. Me and my partner are wondering how many we're going to have to try and fix the replacement rate, but we Yeah, I mean, and it comes back to that yin and yang thing. Maybe we I don't know if we overpopulate. There's a lot of space on the earth, but maybe we grew really quickly and there is a natural rebalancing where it will find an equilibrium. I'm not sure, but I'm definitely on the human survival, thriving side of the conversation. So whatever is required to try and get the human being to be in its most natural state, in its capacity to have children, to love kids, to be great at that so their kids can have kids and they can thrive in the next generation. I think these are crucial times. Otherwise, you start going a little bit, and my mind could do this towards like a kind of pessimistic, is this end times where humans just sort of wean ourselves out and robots have their moment. And humans are so cool. We got to keep the humans.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I've definitely put out a lot of dystopian content on After School.
Yeah.
I've put out a number of videos that show where we could be going, showing trends of, I like to look at things from so many different angles. So there's like a spiritual trend, psychological, mental trends. There's our trends with our hormones, trends with birth rates. If you look at all these things, you can get pretty cynical and pessimistic.
You can. But sometimes that's almost like your video. I think potentially your first video I came across was your one about totalitarianism 5 years ago. And whilst that was, I don't know, maybe that was a more negative lens on reality, whilst pretty truthful, at least while watching the video, it's hard to deny the reality you observe within that great video. That video also motivated me a lot with dose. That was right when I was inventing dose. And I thought, shit, look where we are heading. So sometimes, to an extent, you need the storytelling of the pessimistic lens to motivate the desire to not walk that path. So there's an interesting interplay.
Yeah, the anti-hero defines the hero. So oftentimes the villain is more interesting than the hero because if you're writing a story, you can get really fun and creative with a villain, but a hero has to kind of obey these certain rules, and they have to have morals and principles. And if they do something really wicked, we're kind of like, wait, is that a hero? I don't know. But with the villain, you can just have a lot of fun. And so it's like the crazier times we live in, the crazier the villain, the brighter the good will emerge. It's like you kind of need one without, you can't have one without the other.
You can't. And there'll be great minds emerging right now. There'll be 10-year-olds that are going to become unbelievable minds that really help us to navigate this unique time. And a time that I do think can also be amazing for humans. I think there's much opportunity for millions, if not billions, to have a beautiful experience of life in this world we live in today. But it definitely is one that just requires more conscious, intentional discipline than that of our ancestors.
So I like the angle that you're going, where you're trying to thread this needle, where you're not promoting a life of like rejecting all technology and living in a cabin in the woods. Like how can you're kind of what I think you're saying is like we can have both if we find this balance between the two. Can we walk this narrow path?
Definitely. And there are moments where you have to realize just how phenomenal it really is now, because it's easy to kind of think, oh yeah, look, they didn't have any of these dopamine temptations, so lucky them. But they definitely had their own complications back then that we would not want now. And we have this ability to voluntarily go and spend time in nature, but also retreat to our beautiful, safe homes. We have the ability to go to supermarkets and access food. Whilst it's pretty expensive now, we can still access the food that is great for us. And we can be really present and have beautiful, loving relationships. And we can have amazing opportunities to work in ways uniquely aligned to our skills. There are immense opportunities to live in harmony with the natural world and with the modern world we've created. But currently, we are stuck in dopamine land on the whole. And that's what I believe is causing this feeling within us of that something is missing within our lives. And this like low, anxious, irritable, disconnected feeling. I think it's because our deeper brain chemistry, and then even deeper than our brain chemistry, something is trying to say, it's quite good, but not quite right.
So you're about to be a father pretty soon.
I am.
Congratulations.
Yeah, 8 weeks.
Have you given it a lot of thought about how you're going to approach screens and phones and all these temptations in the world?
Yeah, we are thinking about it a huge amount. And I definitely would preface this by saying I will come to discover just how hard it is to follow whatever I say now once I have the boy or the girl that we're having. But I don't say the boy or the girl because we are not sure what gender they'll want to identify as. I'm saying that because we don't know. Just to clarify, we haven't actually found out.
We're not woke, we promise.
We'll see. But yeah, when our kind of initial goal in the early, let's say 6 months, 12 months, is just to not have the screens, the phones, the TVs like in their face a lot. So they're not kind of observing, seeing like, wow, mum and dad are always looking at this cube in their hand. So my partner is very determined. I'm sure it's going to be tricky to not breastfeed, for example, while scrolling her phone the whole time. So the baby's not thinking like, wow, what's that device? And from so early, the brain is programmed for imitation. Whilst it can't yet imitate the behavior, it's still trying to understand reality. And it's thinking, wow, mum and dad really care about this thing. Just as little babies would have seen their parents scratching the rocks together for the fires and started playing with rocks in their own hands. And that's one goal, is just to quite intentionally use screens in here. We're going to not have a TV, which is pretty extreme maybe, for example, but we're going to try and occasionally, of course, we'll watch a movie on a laptop or whatever it might be, but try not spend our whole evening just kind of with a baby in our hands staring at a screen. So again, it's just like not seeing that reality too much. And then as it grows, we will try our best to delay the screens as much as we possibly can. We are going to be traveling between England and Australia throughout our relationship because my partner's from Australia. So there's going to be some tricky flights if we want to attempt to not have a screen for 30 hours on a plane. No idea how that might look. But the game plan is definitely going to be for them to learn the experience of joy and pleasure and reward and connection and creativity all themselves before they get artificially given it by a phone.
I think that's a great attitude. You know, it's realistic and it's conscious. It's got good intent. And I have no doubt that you're going to approach parenting in just an awesome, great way.
Yeah, we're very curious about it. My partner's a clinical nutritionist, so she's very curious about the whole food side of things. And she's been very consciously, because when a woman is pregnant, it actually creates the microbiome for the child and then sets the kind of preferences they'll have with their nutrition. So she's been very conscious during her pregnancy, and as the baby grows, very conscious. And we're going to really care about the food, the phones, and the nature. That's just going to be really central to us. How can we make sure they are really into eating the healthy food, very able to survive life without looking at screens, and deeply connected with nature? And I'm going to create a story within my kid's mind, this kid, and then hopefully lots of future kids, that's not too dissimilar to the Avatar story where they have Awa as this kind of nature god that they love. I'm going to wear those kids on like my chest, take them to the nature and teach them that that is reality, that is true, that nature is alive and that we are connected to it and it's a higher being than us. And we will see how it goes. I'm sure it will come with good moments and tricky moments.
That's beautiful. I do this thing with my little daughter. She's almost a year old. We've done it every day that she's been on Earth. The first time I took her outside, there's this tree in our backyard. I take her right up to the tree and I pat on the tree. And like for the first like month that she was alive, we'd go up to the tree and she'd have this like very blank expression. I was like, but I just kept doing it every day. We'd go up to the tree and we'd rub the tree and pat on it. And probably by about 2 or 3 months old, she started to get like excited when we get to the tree. She'd go,
no.
Yeah, she'd get excited. And now we go up to the tree and she's reaching for it and hitting it. And she's like giggling. And I put her on the tree and, you know, I'm like, wow, I wonder if this is like her first memory. Yeah. So it is magical.
Man, that's cool. And now you've like created a fascination with trees within her brain through just like a consistent daily action. And that's cool. You think of the difference between her seeing you all the time tapping your phone and thinking, oh, the phone is the thing that's fascinating. Whereas now she's come to discover, oh, nature might be the thing that's fascinating. And one day she'll have a phone and those kind of things. But the more you instill those ideas, the more she'll find balance between the two.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Yesterday we went down to the beach and we went to these tide pools, and we're just grabbing all these weird little creatures, hermit crabs, and there's eels and little fish, and
Nice.
she's holding a crab, and I couldn't even imagine like coming into this world and not knowing what anything is, and then just seeing a crab. It's got to be the weirdest
I
thing in the
know.
world.
What the
Just
hell
having
is
a
that?
crab on you.
Like an alien.
At first she was terrified of it, and then she really wanted to hold it and squeeze it. I was like, no, don't squeeze it too tight. And it was pretty funny. Very rewarding experience. Very fun.
Man. Yeah, and that's just oxytocin, heaven, presence, connection, love, service. That's what the brain wants. And it doesn't want as much of the other dopaminergic things that we get so tempted into.
Absolutely. I wanted to ask you real quick about couple other little things that get a lot of press. Testosterone and estrogen. Is that are these something that you look for in people that are come to you and they're not feeling very well? Is that another thing you address?
Testosterone and estrogen are very interesting. My partner specifically goes deep into this. We're writing a really cool research paper all down this lane of nutritional impact on neurotransmitters at the moment. She goes down into estrogen, progesterone, insulin, cortisol, all these different things, testosterone. And again, they are neurotransmitters, hormones more, that are having a big impact on us, and again, are experiencing significant change. The estrogen is a hormone that's so important, particularly for women, but also for men, for vitality and youthfulness and for your system to run with vibrancy. And one of the main things we're very curious about from the estrogenic lens is how much toxic products within the home are disruptive to that hormone. The bleach and all the things we wash and clean with, very disruptive and causes big surges and crashes in estrogen that are intensifying many hormonal experiences for women. And then testosterone is having an interesting experience where it's almost rising for some women and then also falling for some men. And that's creating a complicated, almost societal level structure within the male-female dynamic. But then also for women, it might create a little bit too much kind of strength and frustration and annoyance for them at times. I empathize with that though. And there is an element of a female needing testosterone. Like women in the wild would have been amazing at fighting for their kids and stuff. And then for the men, it enables you to like doing hard things, not want to do hard things like dopamine, but to like doing hard things. And as a male dynamic, we are shying away from liking doing hard things. So yeah, I think they have a huge impact.
It's amazing how much testosterone fluctuates. If a guy grabs a weapon, his testosterone goes up. If a guy's sports team wins, testosterone goes up. If he gets married, it goes down. Having a kid really makes it go down, because if you think about it in the moment, if you put that evolutionary lens over this, when a man has a baby, it's not time to be aggressive anymore. It's time to be like tender and cuddly and kind of the opposite of testosterone,
Yeah. And there's also that element of men slightly gain weight as a result of that as well. When they first have a kid, estrogen slightly rises, which helps to retain weight within the body, because the male needs to be able to sacrifice their own resources for the kid to be the priority. So it's actually natural for their body to put on a little bit of weight in advance of the baby. And these mechanisms have their own natural kind of orchestra type way of operating, but then some of the ways in which we're interfering with them and then throwing them out of their nice natural symphony.
And then you've mentioned cortisol a few times. How does that play into all this?
Cortisol almost has a bit like dopamine, a bit of a misunderstanding around what cortisol is all about. Cortisol puts us into action. It helps generate energy and starts the system. And that's very useful to be able to have something that will put you into action. Morning sunlight, which obviously people have become fascinated by within the whole kind of, what's that word called? Bio-optimization sort of world, biohackers.
Oh, yeah.
Morning sunlight creates this rise in cortisol, which will put your system into drive. And that's obviously very useful. But then maybe high levels of cortisol in the evening wouldn't be so useful, because you don't want to put your system into action late at night before you go to sleep. And cortisol is something I see as you want it earlier in the day, and you want it to almost rise high in the morning and then go through a really nice calming experience throughout the later day or as the day tails off. And that means not having highly stimulating and stressful experiences late at night, but moving them more towards the morning. So if you were someone that was super into your weightlifting and lifting super heavy weights, putting music in your ears and really going for it, there are definitely benefits to that experience. But you wouldn't want to do it at 10 o'clock at night because it's going to be super disruptive to your circadian rhythm. And too much cortisol throughout the day does have a stressing effect on the system, can lead to things like burnout and things like that over prolonged periods of time. Over cortisol production can actually inhibit some of the endorphins that we mentioned earlier that de-stress us. So again, an interesting interplay, but we want hard, more stressful things, even if it's good stress, earlier in the day and calmer evenings.
Wow, that's a great point. You remind me of a quote from Mark Twain. He says, eat a frog first thing in the morning and the rest of the day is going to be easy. And it's just kind of... and so, yeah, I've seen graphs of that huge cortisol spike right when we wake up. And that's interesting. So if we do things that spike our cortisol later in the day, that will disrupt that. You know, we kind of want that big spike in the morning and then it eases down throughout the day. And then by the time we're about to go to bed, it's more about melatonin and kind of just calming, turn the lights down. And if we turn bright lights on and lift a bunch of weights and blast music, that's going to create a greater stress response, more cortisol, and that will disrupt our sleep.
Definitely. And cortisol is a hormone that's built within our system to wake us. You wake because the cortisol rises. It's not that the cortisol rises because you've woken up. It's the other way around. And a really simple, tangible example of how we're dysregulating the system is we sit on the sofa in the evening watching a movie, for example, and I'm not someone that would take it as far as saying you can't even look at screens in the evening because of the blue light. Yeah, it would be great if we all looked at the trees all evening, but it's just not realistic. So you can watch your screen, but you'll likely have some quite nice calm lighting in the evening when you're watching a movie. Then we'll go into the bathroom to brush our teeth and put the overhead light on and stand in there for 5 minutes while we go to the bathroom, wash our face and brush our teeth. And then we've completely reactivated our cortisol system just as it was so ready for sleep. And then we completely threw the system back out of balance. So I'll consciously go from watching telly or chilling out in the evening, and I'll walk into the bathroom with almost like the corridor light on so I can see what's going on. I'll put the toothpaste on my toothbrush and stand in the corridor and stand in like low lighting just so I don't get a 5-minute cortisol spike late at night, because all these things compound together and impact our system.
Yeah, if I've gotten anything from Andrew Huberman, it's that light controls so much of our behaviors. So like right when I wake up, I'm blasting all the lights on. I've turned like my studio lights on. It's kind of ridiculous. Like there's like beams of light shooting out my windows and you know, it really does wake you up. And then at night, I'm like so paranoid about like everything's like candle lit. Like I'm in my bathroom trying to put toothpaste on and it's like pitch dark and I can't even get the toothpaste on the thing because I don't want any light. But
these micro decisions though, they matter.
And it's funny because people have taken this so far where like, you know, we've talked about how people go down the wrong path, but then there's people who have like biohacked themselves into oblivion where they're like, I took my ice bath. I got sun directly in my eyes. I'm, you know, I have fasted for 2 days. Like they're just, I like that. I mean, I prefer biohacking.
It's a better path than the quick dopaminergic path, but,
it's kind of hilarious though.
You can though, ironically, take it to the point where you're actually developing a different type of dopamine cortisol addiction and it is still stressing you out. I noticed when I was first getting super into wearing Whoop and Oura Ring and obsessing over my recovery scores, my HRV and all these different markers, that I was actually just getting addicted to that instead. And it also was stressing me and it was impacting my overall energy structure because I was going almost too far down that. So there's a middle ground chilled lane. But I think with the yin and yang type idea, better to tip heavily into biooptimization and then come back than to just tip a little bit out.
Yeah, sometimes these hacks can, you know, like my wife will wear this Oura Ring all night and I felt like she slept better before this ring. And now like the ring tells her she didn't get a good night of sleep. And, that dictates the rest of the day a little bit. I'm like,
Bro,
no, I mean,
honestly, I got screwed. It really started to screw me up, that those data things, and I ended up doing some content about it, and so many people experience the same thing, where the data is actually reducing their quality of sleep. They're useful initially, like if you drink a couple glasses of red wine and then you see the data, you're like, wow, I didn't know red wine had such a big impact on my HRV. So they're useful as like an initial observer of your inner physiology, but on the long term, I think it's better to take them back off.
yeah, my wife is a very light sleeper and I'm very deep. So it was very interesting. One night I put it on and it was just like the deepest, most consistent, unbroken night of sleep ever. And then you just see, the rest of her days are just the lines always waking up.
Brutal.
Yeah, brutal. Oh, and one other thing that you mentioned in this conversation I'm curious about is you said you quit caffeine. Is there something to that?
I would say coming away from caffeine is definitely a later requirement in the journey of optimization of the brain chemistry. I think the phones first thing in the morning, or the pornography, or the alcohol, or the ultra processed food, these are key things to observe. For me, I'm very curious about how do I get my system to run calmer and desire oxytocin more, just to desire the state of love more than quick pleasure. And caffeine keeps me in a more sympathetic, hyperstimulated state. And then my capacity to manage the sugar in the phones and everything seems to be less, because it's keeping me in this overall heightened state of operation. And coming away from the caffeine just meant my system ran a little bit slower. And for me, that's led to better energy and focus and mood and things like that. But I was a big coffee guy. Like, I freaking loved coffee. So it was an interesting journey. But it does seem to be better. But as I say, I don't think it's a have to.
That's good. Yeah, I never really started on caffeine, but
okay. Maybe that's why you got a good attention span when you're drawing.
Maybe. Well, I also just love drawing so much, because most things that I struggle to pay attention to, but the drawing is so fun for me that that's time. 4 hours just flies by like a minute.
How many hours did it take you to draw the caveman and the cube?
That one took, so I usually release a video every 2 weeks, but this is going to be 3 weeks. So I spent an extra week on it, and I got so excited about our collaboration. And
it's so good, the drawing in it as well. It's crazy.
Yeah, I really think that idea could be expanded upon. Like, it could be a whole world, and it could be a book. Like, I have all the art saved. If we want to turn it into a book, we can definitely do that. I mean,
I've showed a couple people close to me, and they were like, wow, that doesn't look like the beginning. It looks like just the beginning of this. It doesn't just look like one idea on its own. It looks like the beginning of a whole new thing.
I mean, we left some danglers out there. Like, what happened to his brother? Like, is his brother still alive? Like,
I think Carl's going to be heading back in to try and find him.
Yeah, I think it's a great story. I mean, it was awesome collaborating with you. I think it's going to be a big hit. We just got to find the right title. I'm going to test a couple titles out, and
cool.
So far I actually released it on Patreon to a few people.
Okay, cool.
The response has been they loved it. So
cool. Okay,
whoever finds this video is gonna absolutely love it. And I went the extra mile. I even hired a composer to make the music for it, so the music fits perfectly.
The music's crazy, and the because there's faster periods and slower periods, and the music aligns so well. And then you've also put this echo on my voice with the AI screen kind of person thing, and it creates this eerie sort of vibe. It's very cool.
That was the composer. I gave him the audio, and I was like, make this dystopian and fun and suspenseful, and just like he'll get the vibe. So Caleb Winters, shout out to Caleb Winters. He did the audio, it. And I think he did that to your voice too.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah, so it'll come out tomorrow. I'll try to release this podcast tomorrow as well to kind of go along with it.
Yeah, nice. Okay.
Yeah, man, it was awesome collaborating with you, and I'm sure we'll do another.
I loved it, mate. I think this is the beginning of a fun adventure, and thank you for also asking such good questions today. Such a good conversation.
Yeah, man. All right. Well, this has been a conversation with TJ Power. Check out Dose. His protocol is amazing, and we really need to be aware about these brain chemicals because it's ruling our life. And where can people find you?
Yeah. Ironically, you can go on Instagram at TJ Power and you can discover how to manage this stuff. And then, just at TJ Power on Instagram. And then my book is called The Dose Effect and takes you on this whole protocol and this really cool visual journey to embedding all these habits into your life.
Awesome. Well, TJ, thanks a lot, man. This has been a great conversation.
Thanks for having me, brother.